Reid and I'm your district reading coordinator, and today I'd like to share with you just some ideas of how to organize and structure your research unit as we come upon that in our spring semester. So as any unit of study, the first place we start is looking at our TEKS. What is the state saying that we had to teach for our grade level? And so if you'll take a look, I'd like to share with you our vertical alignment. And so the first place that we have to begin from K all the way through 5th and even 6th grade is to make a plan. And as we can see with our vertical alignment, the first thing we do in kindergarten is we ask questions about a topic, and the key word is the class-wide interest. This is very important because you are modeling how to think through curiosity questions, all of their wonderings. This is what we're looking for. And then as we move into 1st grade and 2nd grade, now then we start generating a list of topics of class-wide interest again, and then formulate the open-ended questions. This is where we really start talking about what are they really curious about, how do we ask those open-ended questions. And again, here, 1st and 2nd grade, you are doing the exact same thing, but the key is 1st grade, you're doing it with the teacher. So what does that mean for K1 and 2? Kindergarten and 1st grade, you're doing it as a whole class only. This is not meant to be done as an individual project. Now, yes, you're going to have students who are totally excelling and they can take that and run with it, but after you have modeled it with them, okay? 2nd grade, you're doing it exactly as 1st grade has done, generating the list of topics, asking those open-ended questions. I would suggest, because we're still dealing with a lot of kiddos who have not actually done a research project, I would do one as a whole class first and then branch off and go into small groups and then allow the small groups to generate their list of topics and questions, okay? So again, K1 and 2, very heavy teacher guided, okay? Then as we move into 3rd through 5th grade, 3rd and 4th, your TEKS are identical, and it says that you're going to generate research topics from personal interest. So there's the difference moving from K1 and 2. K1 and 2 is about class-wide interest. 3rd and 4th grade is personal interest, okay? And now then, or they're going to be brainstorming with others. So they can still have their personal interest or collaborate with a small group with a partner, all right? From there, once they have their brainstorming topic, then they will continue on and formulate open-ended questions about the major research topic, all right? And then our last grade level is 5th grade. 5th grade, this is also done independently. They will brainstorm, then they will consult with others. So after the student has already brainstormed ideas, they can consult with their partner, with a teacher, and then decide upon a topic for multiple open-ended questions. So they're really diving deep into that topic. All right, so the progression as far as making a plan goes, K1 and 2, heavy teacher generated. K and 1 is only done with a teacher. 2nd grade, teacher does it first with them and then branch off into small group. 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, you will be doing this independently. And so, but please feel free, if you have students who have not completed a research project before, always model this for them and then release them to do independent work, all right? So that is our first step. We've got to have a list of topics, really asking those deep questions. And so what I have kind of wanted to share with you today is something that I think will help, because this is an opportune time for us to really branch over into other content areas, because coming in the spring semester, research is an ELAR unit of study. It is not a separate identity, it is part of your TEKS. So now we can go tap into our science and our social studies TEKS, because you're already having to study those units of study. You'll always have the resources in your classroom, so you're not having to do double the work, okay? So what I've created for you for your research project is a list of topics by grade level, by content area. So if you want to choose to go the route of science, then you'll be able to see what are your science topics. If you want to go the route of social studies, here are your social studies topics. So because you will already have these resources in your classroom, you're not having to find double the work of resources, okay? So here's how research is going to lay out for our spring semester. In kindergarten, you will have your research project in the 6 weeks. 1st grade, you will have research in the 5th. Second grade, you have research in the 5th. Third grade, your research unit is in the 6 weeks. Fourth grade, unfortunately, you've already had research, but the good news is that because your students have already dove into research projects, then this could really become an independent station during your ELAR block time. So instead of having just extra stuff out there or doing worksheets at independent station, your students could truly take on a different independent research project. And so I'm looking at your 5th 6 weeks for that. And then 5th grade, your research project is in the 5th 6 weeks. Okay, so if you look at the topics, what's really interesting, should you and your class or individual students take on a science topic in kindergarten and in 1st grade during the 5th and 6 weeks, you're studying plants. So the research projects could go along with plant study. 2nd grade, you're looking at animal and plant basic needs. 3rd grade, you will be studying ecosystems. 4th grade, traits, food chains, and adaptations. And then in 5th grade, life cycles and inherited traits and learned behaviors. So just something to think about as you start guiding your students through what topics are they interested in, what kind of questions do we need to ask. So this will be taking on more of a science structure. Should your class want to take on more of a social studies theme, you can see your topics here as well. All right, so just something to think about so that you're not having to have all these different topics going on in your classroom without the resources at hand. Because you're studying in these subject areas in your classroom, you will already have the resources provided in your room for you. Okay? So just something to think about. So after you have your topic and you have your open-ended questions, the next place we have to go now is we have to decide on what sources. And so the next part of making a plan is really guiding your students through where do we find our sources at? How are we going to find all this information? What can we use? And your TEKS specifically tell you things to use. And so in kindergarten, if you can look at your sources, it's really who are the people in the classroom, in the school, in the library, or at home where they can answer their questions. Okay, it's really looking at, it's all about them as we know in kindergarten. So it's really looking into their personal environment there. 1st grade and 2nd grade, you have to decide what source of information can be found, and this is where you're going to start looking at other information to answer their questions. So you're really opening up their whole horizon to where can we go to find this? Can we go to the library? Do we look in books? Can we look online? Just let the possibilities flow, okay? Again, 1st grade is with a teacher, and then 2nd grade, do it first with a teacher and then in your small group or individual, okay? And what's awesome with this is that in K and 1, this is a great opportunity for your literacy aides to help with this as well. All right. Then as we move into 3rd and 4th grade, you're having to find your sources, but your sources, you are the 1st grade level, 3rd grade, who has to start conducting surveys, interviews, and all of the other pieces. Looking at encyclopedias, those deep resources. So 3rd grade, you are the 1st grade level that has to do that. And then, of course, that just continues on through 3rd, 4th, and 5th. All right? So that is the whole point before you ever get into kids going to the library, picking out books, going online. You have to take the time to make a plan. All right? So that is our action step first. Make your plan. So to recap the planning session, kindergarten and 1st grade, whole class only. 2nd grade, whole class first, and then you branch off into small group. 3rd, 4th, and 5th is individual research projects. Okay? So now then, once we've already selected our topic, you've already asked your questions. So now it's time to have some kind of organizational framework. How do we help our students keep all their thoughts organized, keep all the papers together, don't let it all get clustered inside their desk or in their folders. And so here is an organizational trick. If you have attended any of Ruby Payne's trainings, you probably have seen this organizational tool, but I'm telling you, as a teacher and as a mom who has used this with a child who has a very hard time with organizational skills, this is a godsend, okay? So the first piece we want to do is you have to look at your questions, your list of questions, and the list of topics, and really narrow down 3 or 4 questions that are really open-ended that you would like for the students or the class to really dive into. Once you have that selected, then you need to create an envelope for each of those questions. I would not recommend going over 4. 2 to 3 is a great number at the primary grades, but 4 is awesome as well. So, first thing you want to do, you'll need a file folder, an open-ended file folder, and then just plain white envelopes, okay? Then what we'll do is take your glue, and you want to glue it to where the envelope front is glued down so you can provide the flap is open at the top, okay? And then we'll do that. And then we have, space it out. You can do this, you can have your students do this. If you have your students do this, they take more ownership, but you know your students, so you know who can handle it. And then again, we'll finish up with our bottom row. And again, able to open up the flap. And then our last envelope. Okay. And then all flaps can open. And whenever we're done, our folder can close. All right, so that's step number 1 that we have to do first. Then the second thing we want to do is really give each of our envelopes a title, a label. And what we're going to use for those labels is going to come straight from your questions. So, for the sake of just easy understanding, and since many of us will be using animals as one of our research studies, if you choose to go the science route, then I'm going to go with an animal study. And so I'm going to take on the research topic of studying animals and their basic needs. So my first question may have to be about food. So I'm going to take literally a question that came from our brainstorming, our open-ended questions that we did together or individually, and then I glue it to my envelope, my first envelope, okay? Now at this point you do have a choice. You do not have to do this next step, but if you choose to want to use this folder over and over for additional research projects, before you glue your question down on the envelope, you could send this folder through the laminator, laminate it. When it comes out, just use your X-Acto knife or your scissors and slice to allow the flap to open. And then you can reuse this folder from project to project to project. It's strictly your choice. If you choose not to laminate, then once the student is done with the project, then all of this could be sent home. So it's really up to you. But for our case today, I did not laminate. So I'm going to glue the question on. So I have a food question, basic need. Another area that I want my students to explore is the animal's shelter. So then we will research what are some shelters for this animal. And then another basic need that I would like for them to explore is the protection. Is there protection? How do they protect themselves? So then I would glue the protection question here. And then as always, as your primary students start doing research, they always find all these different factoids that they love to find. So how much does a hippopotamus weigh, or how much food can an ant carry? So all those different fun facts, those little trivial, the trivia pieces they love to see. And so I always like to have one area, one envelope that's about a fun fact. Okay, so once you have your questions glued on to your envelopes, now then you have already designated what each envelope is going to be about. So now comes the next important part. The next piece is we want to give some kind of color coding system, because that is what helps keep our students focused and organized. So what I would like to do, you have 2 different choices. You can choose to use colored index cards, or you can choose to use plain white. All right, it is your choice. I personally like the colored, just because it's easy to find. I'm not having to go and make another step. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to designate a color for each of the envelopes. So I'll go pink here, yellow here, orange here, and green here. So now I'm going to take a marker that corresponds, and I'm going to put a dot that matches the color coding system here. Then I have orange. Then I have yellow. And then I have green. Again, if you do not want to use the colored index cards, I encourage you to still use the color coding system just by using the markers and then the white envelope. So you could do this exact same thing, just come back and color code the card. And then the student can match it. Okay, so you can still use plain index cards. It's really up to you and your choice. Okay, so now then, once you have the color coding system in place, now it's time for the students to really start going through and finding their research. And every time that they go through one of their sources, they can read the entire source. And then as they find facts, then they write that fact that answers that question on the corresponding card. Okay? So, an example of this would be this student right here was studying the historical events in Texas. And so this student had 4 different questions, and the teacher has already color-coded the envelopes. The questions are glued on here, and so as the student was using different resources, the student would write their findings on the card. It was a green card because it answered this question, and then it matched up to the green envelope, and so the student was able to place their findings here. And so literally every envelope matched up to the color, it answers the questions, and so students can do ongoing research, and you're already helping them categorize their thinking and their processes with this. One thing that I would like to recommend to you as you have your students go through the research and going through this organizational structure, 3rd grade and 4th grade, you need to start looking at what is the requirement from your standards dealing with your sources, having to document the sources. Where did you find this at? So if you're having to have a bibliography, 5th grade, which you do, then what I would suggest is whenever the student finds their information, that you have that student turn the card over and write where they found that information at. It's all in one location instead of having to go back and have a whole separate page. At this point, have them document exactly where they found the information at right here. So everything is together. The beauty of using this organizational system is that literally now, once the student has found their information, it's just a matter of building a paragraph over each of the envelopes, and then it's all together. One more piece of information that I have found to be very successful with students who just have a hard time reaching goals is setting an expectation for each of your envelopes. For this student here, we knew that we wanted to have 3 to 5 cards, okay? The teacher set to have 3 cards for this question. However, the student said, if I can find 2 more, can I have extra credit? So sure, the teacher never stopped the student from learning. So this is what the numbers are for on this envelope. Is that so now the student knows whenever he finds a card or she finds a card, when she puts a card in, she marks it off. So now she knows how many more cards they're having to constantly pull cards in and out of the envelope. Just another tool to help students set goals, know what they're looking for, and an organizational framework. Again, as you're looking at this, you can see where this teacher chose to use literally a hanging file system, because the file folder, she said she just didn't have enough of them at the time, but she had tons of hanging files. It's up to you. What the beauty of using a hanging file in the same manner is that whenever the student is done or it's time to stop doing the research at that time, the students fold it up and go put it in the hanging crate. So all of this is put together and it's hanging in one system. It doesn't get lost in a desk. So just something to think about as you start to plan your research unit. So that was an example of our organizational framework. And so to guide you through some of your other TEKS is that something I want to draw your attention to is as you're gathering your sources, again, K and 1, you're doing it with the teacher as far as gathering evidence, and it's telling you exactly where to find this. Second grade, you're doing exactly what first grade has to do of finding your evidence and your sources. But what I want to draw attention to is third grade, you are the first one that really has to do the interviewing and the surveys. You're the first one that has to draw data from different sources and references, as well as the first one who has to also use visual sources for information. So you are the first grade level that has to do that. So just be aware of that as you go through and gathering your sources. Another thing that is very interesting as we start taking, once we've done all the research and we've looked at our sources and we've gone and we started reading things and making our note cards and putting it in the envelope, is exactly what does the state say we have to do to put all this information into a paper format or some kind of presentation format. Well, this is really interesting because as you're going through and you're using multiple pieces to document, what's interesting is that technically the first written response of expectation does not occur until third grade. Third grade is the first grade level that says take simple notes and different pieces. So you, up until this point, you're just writing down what they find through some kind of visual documentation. So it could be their drawings, it could be word with drawings, simple sentences, and also because third grade is the first grade level that really has to take notes, simple notes and paraphrasing, you're also the first grade level to introduce students to the difference between paraphrasing and plagiarism. That truly does not show itself in K1 and 2. It starts in third grade, but since you are the first grade level to really introduce taking interviews, taking notes, how do we make those little notes on that index card? Okay, so just be aware, third grade, you are the pivotal point of starting a full-blown research. Okay, so I wanted to draw your attention to that. And then one more piece is where do we come down to synthesizing this? And all that means is that many times we start getting a lot of information and students get overwhelmed with how do I put it all together. And so once your students get to this synthesizing piece, they have been collecting their cards, they have been looking at all their information, and then they come to you and say, you know what, Ms. Reid, I really do not have enough information. I'm having a hard time finding enough information for this question. So that's whenever you have to really process with the student and say, okay, well maybe this question is maybe too narrow, it may not be broad enough, or maybe we need to go back and look at your brainstorming list and change the question. So this is where that synthesizing comes into play, and that's why it's so easy to see if the student is having a hard time getting their documentation for that question. Whereas before, in another kind of framework, the students really do not know until they start writing. And then they can say, I only have 2 things. So just something to think about with that synthesizing stage, why this is so important, this structure is so important for that piece of your standard. Okay? And then what we always want to strive to see is how do we put all the pieces together. So you started off by making a plan. You did your brainstorming, you listed questions, then you set up your organizational folder with your envelopes and the questions glued on top. The students started taking notes and reading sources. Once they have all those sources together, then they start building, third grade beginning, they start building their paper. All right? So what do we have to do to present the research project? Technically, kindergarten, according to our state, you do not have to present the research. It's the process of all your wanderings. Because you're doing it as a class and with the teacher, everyone pretty much knows what we're finding out. Okay? First and second grade, you begin the presentation piece. And notice that you're having to create a visual display or a dramatization to convey the results of the research. And again, this is done with the assistant. And so this can easily be simple as a trifold, to where if the student is investigating an animal, these could be the different questions, the different findings that they have. And then once they write and draw their little picture of what they found, they can also illustrate the animal. And so just something as simple as a trifold, a diorama. If you're studying social studies, they can reenact a piece of this. What does community building mean to them? So just something like that we have to begin. It does not have to be in paragraph written format for research here. Now, should you choose to want your students to expand, sure, you can do that. But again, remember, first grade, it is done with assistance. Third grade, you are drawing conclusions and writing a brief explanation. You are the first grade level that has to put all their thoughts together in written format. Okay? Again, the word is brief, so this is a great time where you can start really building up how do I structure paragraphs and all of that. That will correspond with your writing standards as well. And then also third grade, you are the first one that has to create a works-cited page. So from third grade on, as soon as your students start finding their information, have them turn that card over and record where did they find the information at. So this will save you so much time when it comes to this piece of the research project. All right? And then again, fifth grade, you are doing the full-blown bibliography page. Okay? So one more final question that I like to leave you with, that is to think about, which way do you want to take your research? Do you want to go in the science path? Do you want to go in the social studies path? And do you want to kind of help guide your students into what topics? Okay? Some resources that some of you have on your campus: never underestimate your library. Yes, you have numerous books, and our Destiny system, which is our library system, it has a great resource tool that you can literally go into the library, go into Destiny, and type in whatever your topic is, and it will tell you all the books that your library has available for you, both on the shelf and online. Our library system has numerous online books that are audio, so your students have that access as well at school and at home. Also in the library, we have many resources such as the National Geographic for Kids, and I know some campuses take this as a weekly reader as well. So these are great resources, very kid-friendly, easy to read, level readers as well. So it has the pictures and it has facts that the students can research. We also have several Scholastic level readers on campuses and also in your IRL. So this will be another great resource to utilize. And then, as always, your nonfiction areas in your library have many books where it's based upon topics. And so this will be another great resource for your teachers and students to really pull there. And then, one last piece, do not forget to go to your library and ask your librarian, what kind of magazines does your library have? Many libraries have your Big Backyard, Ranger Rick, Time for Kids, and so these are wonderful resources, great illustrations, simplistic reading. So for primary, research can be done. We do have the resources, as well as our Reading A to Z has several nonfiction and that you can display or print off for the students. You can also utilize ReadWorks that has a lot of nonfiction reading, and that is based upon Lexile levels, which you get off of your iStation reports. And ReadWorks, if you do not have an account, I have ReadWorks pieces posted in K through 2, and I post those all the time. As a matter of fact, I just posted one this morning. So, and that's all grade levels, K through 5th grade. Okay? So just know that you have the resources on your campus. Should you have any questions or concerns about the standards, about how to set up this organizational folder or various resources, please do not hesitate to contact me. I would love to help you, your grade level, or even your campus. Thank you very much.